What if one day you realized your entire life was a lie? 33 years of marriage, a loving home, 2 grown children. Alistair Ford believed his family was unshakable until the cracks began to show. At first, they were subtle: a distant glance, a forced smile, a text message from an unknown number that changed everything. When he saw the name Grant on her phone, he didn't yet realize it was the point of no return. He didn't know that what lay ahead wasn't just betrayal, it was war. Cold, calculated, ruthless. The only question left was, who would come out on top? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Now, let's get started. I learned in the harshest way possible just how delicate trust can be, and how quickly a man's life can unravel without warning. My story takes place a few years back, during a time when I believed my family was whole, though in hindsight, I now recognize the naivety of that assumption. My name is Alistair Ford. I am 58 years old, and for 33 years, I was married to my wife, Sabrina. Together, we built a life, raising 2 children, Adam, now 25, and Hannah, 22. Our marriage, like any other, had its flaws. No relationship is without its struggles, but I had always believed that the foundation we built was strong, that our love was as steadfast as the walls of our home. We had endured hardships, faced the natural challenges of any long-term commitment, yet I never doubted our dedication to one another. I was wrong. The illusion of stability began to crumble a few months ago when Sabrina's behavior started to shift in ways I couldn't ignore. Sabrina had always been ambitious, excelling in her role as a project manager at a well-known marketing firm. Long hours were nothing out of the ordinary, but lately, her late nights at the office had become increasingly frequent. At first, I brushed it off, attributing it to a demanding project or the corporate restructuring her company was undergoing. But then, small details started to stand out, subtle changes that gnawed at me. One evening, after an ordinary day at work, I walked into the kitchen to find Sabrina preparing dinner, just as she always did. Everything seemed normal, yet something felt off. She was distant, preoccupied, as though her thoughts were elsewhere. Her movements were slightly more rigid than usual, her expression tense. I told myself I was imagining things, but deep down, an unease took hold. "Is everything all right?" I asked, settling into my chair with the evening paper. "Yeah, of course," she responded, but there was a tightness in her voice, a hesitation that didn't sit right with me. I couldn't place exactly what was wrong, so I let it go. Then, a few nights later, I noticed a text message on her phone. It was brief, from an unknown number, and read, "Looking forward to tonight. It's been too long." I didn't react immediately. Instead, I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was just a casual message from a colleague, a harmless exchange between friends. But no matter how much I tried to reason with myself, the words clung to my thoughts, refusing to fade. I had no proof, no real reason to make accusations. Sabrina had never given me cause to doubt her before. Was I simply being paranoid? The following week, I brought up her late nights again. She tensed slightly before offering a quick, dismissive response. "It's just work, Alistair. You know how it is." Her tone was sharper than usual, her demeanor guarded. I noticed the shift, yet I forced myself to ignore it. I wanted to trust her, to believe that everything was as it had always been. But an unease had settled inside me, growing heavier with each passing day. Then came the company party, a standard corporate gathering, nothing out of the ordinary. Sabrina had mentioned it in passing weeks before, but when I brought it up again, her reaction was odd. "Am I invited?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Of course," she said, though she avoided my gaze. "But it's mostly work people. I didn't think you'd be interested." Something about the way she answered felt too smooth, too rehearsed, as if she had anticipated the question. Though I let it drop, doubt took root. She never mentioned the party again. A week before the event, I ran into an old friend, Rick Sather, at a cafe. Rick and I had worked in advertising together years ago, and we still kept in touch occasionally. As we chatted, the subject of the party surfaced. "Are you going?" I asked casually. Rick looked at me, puzzled. "Of course. I assumed you'd be there. Sabrina always goes to these things with her team. You're not coming?" "No," I replied slowly. "She said I wasn't invited." Rick frowned. "That's odd. It's an open event. Spouses are always included. She's been involved in planning it for weeks." My stomach twisted. This wasn't a simple oversight. Sabrina hadn't just forgotten to invite me. She had deliberately chosen not to. But why? That evening, I confronted her, keeping my voice even. "You didn't mention the party." She hesitated for just a beat too long before responding. "I must have forgotten. Sorry, I thought I told you." I didn't believe her. "Rick Sather mentioned that all spouses were invited. Why didn't you tell me?" Her expression hardened slightly. "I'm sure I did," she said, her voice tinged with irritation. There was a strain in her words now, an urgency to shut down the conversation. And that's when I knew. I was standing at the edge of something far bigger than a forgotten invitation. The woman I had shared my life with for more than 3 decades, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was hiding something. Over the following days, the weight of suspicion became unbearable. The late nights, the guarded responses, the cryptic text. I had tried to ignore the warning signs, convinced myself that I was reading too much into things. But the puzzle pieces were falling into place, forming a picture I couldn't deny. Something was deeply wrong. And for the first time in my marriage, I had to face a terrifying reality. I no longer knew the woman I had pledged to spend my life with. I needed evidence, something undeniable to validate the unease that had been gnawing at me. Lately, she had grown secretive, especially with her phone, a stark contrast to the openness we once shared. Determined, I began to observe more closely. One evening after she had left for work, I picked up her phone again, scrolling through her messages, and then I found it. A text that made my stomach drop. This one was different. It was from someone named Grant. "Can't wait for tonight. See you after the meeting. I'll be at your place as planned." A cold wave of dread washed over me. Grant? I had never heard that name before. The implications of the message were impossible to ignore. Sabrina was meeting another man. The weight of the realization hit me like a sledgehammer. My thoughts spiraled. Was this the person she had been sneaking away to see on all those late nights? I couldn't be certain, but one thing was clear. I couldn't dismiss this any longer. My hands shook, my stomach churned with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. What was I supposed to do next? Should I wait and gather more proof? Should I follow her to see it with my own eyes? The fear of what I might uncover rooted me in place, but I knew I couldn't sit idly by. The uncertainty was unbearable. I had to find out the truth. The following days felt torturous. Sabrina had grown even more distant, her mood shifting unpredictably. She avoided eye contact, her responses to my questions vague and evasive. The signs were everywhere. The way she kept her phone face down, how she slipped out of the room for hushed conversations, the nervous energy she carried. It was driving me insane. That night, I made up my mind. I would follow her. Over dinner, she casually mentioned she had a late client meeting. I didn't challenge her. I just waited. The moment she stepped out, I grabbed my keys and quietly followed. My heart pounded as I kept my distance, trailing her car through the dark streets. A part of me wanted to turn back, to pretend I had never read that message, but I knew I wouldn't. She drove for about 20 minutes before pulling into a quiet, unfamiliar neighborhood on the outskirts of town. I parked a few streets away, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I watched her. She pulled into the driveway of a house I had never seen before. For a moment, she sat in her car, hesitating. Then, She stepped out and walked toward the door. I sat frozen. The street was eerily quiet, the weight of the night pressing in around me. Was this where she had been going all those times? Was this Grant's house? I struggled to process the reality before me. The woman I had spent over 30 years with, the one I had built my life around. Was she really doing this? I waited. The minutes dragged into what felt like hours, but she never came back out. A sickening certainty settled over me. I couldn't sit there any longer. Starting my car, I drove home, but the image of her stepping through that door was seared into my mind. There was no undoing this, no coming back from it. I had to confront her. When I walked through the door, she was already there, curled up on the couch, feigning interest in the TV. She didn't even look up as I entered. I stood there for a moment, watching her, my mind racing. How was I supposed to say this? How did I even begin? Finally, I took a breath and spoke. "Who is Grant?" Her body went rigid. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, as she turned to face me, I caught the flicker of panic in her eyes. She tried to collect herself, but the damage was done. "Alistair, She faltered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think." A hollow laugh escaped me. "Not what I think?" My voice was steady, too controlled. "Then what is it, Sabrina? Who the hell is Grant?" She shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting away. He's just a friend, Alistair. I swear, a friend." My blood boiled. Did she really expect me to believe that? A friend who sent secretive texts? A friend she met in secret? I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my voice even. "Do you think I'm stupid?" I asked, my tone sharp. "I saw the messages, Sabrina. I know you've been sneaking around. Stop lying." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not anymore. "Alistair, please, just listen. Listen." I cut her off, my voice laced with exhaustion. "I've been listening to your lies for months. I've given you chance after chance. But I'm done." The words left my mouth before I could stop them, but they were true. In that moment, something inside me fractured. This wasn't just betrayal. It was the end of everything we had built. I was livid. The sting of betrayal coursed through me like fire, searing and relentless. She needed to hear the truth, the unfiltered, brutal reality of what she had done. Tears streaked her cheeks, her face a portrait of regret, but I felt nothing. Whatever sympathy I once had for her had long since vanished. "How long, Sabrina?" My voice was like a blade, slicing through the heavy silence. "How long has this been going on?" Her lower lip quivered before she finally whispered, "A few months." The words barely left her mouth before she sucked in a shaky breath. "I never meant for it to happen, Alistair. It was a mistake, something small that spiraled out of control. I didn't want it to end up like this." Her explanations rang hollow. My fists tightened at my sides as I fought to keep my composure. Yelling wouldn't undo what had been done. I wouldn't be fooled by her remorse, wouldn't allow her desperate pleas to rewrite the past. I had invested years into this marriage, years of trust, of devotion, of blind faith. And what did I get in return? Betrayal? Humiliation? "I'm finished," I said, my voice steady despite the fury clawing at my insides. "This marriage is over, Sabrina. I won't stay with someone who could deceive me like this. Whatever happens next, you'll have to handle on your own." Her face contorted with panic. "No, Alistair, please, don't do this. I'll end it. I'll cut him off. I swear we can fix this." I took a step back, shaking my head. "I can't even look at you without seeing him. The thought of it, of what you did, makes me sick." Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing in the wake of a choice that would change everything. For days, I drifted through a haze of anger and disbelief. The same cruel thoughts replayed in my mind, circling like vultures. And at the center of them all was Grant, a man I had never met, yet who had stolen something that belonged to me. He had crossed a line, and I wouldn't let it go unpunished. Not yet. Not until I decided exactly how to make him pay. I had always prided myself on restraint, on rationality, but this was different. There was a darkness in me now, something simmering just beneath the surface. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a man with a purpose, and I would ensure they both faced the consequences. I started with Grant. Digging into his life was easier than I anticipated. People always leave traces, especially when they think they're untouchable. His name was Grant Fuhrer, a sales manager at a rival firm. I unearthed everything: his job, his home, his routines, his weaknesses. With each new revelation, my plan solidified. One afternoon, I made my move. Entering his office under the guise of a business discussion, I found him waiting, unaware that this meeting was anything but professional. He greeted me with an easy smile, offering his hand like we were nothing more than strangers. "Alistair, right? I've heard a lot about you." He motioned toward his desk. "What can I do for you?" I forced a calm demeanor, though my blood boiled beneath the surface. "I've been considering our companies," I said smoothly. "There might be potential for collaboration." His grin widened, enthusiasm lighting up his face. He launched into a sales pitch, completely unaware that every word only fueled my fury. And then, when the moment was right, I struck. "You know, Grant," I said, leaning in, my voice edged with quiet menace, "I've been hearing your name a lot lately. And honestly, I'm surprised. Surprised that a man like you would be foolish enough to involve himself with my wife." His expression shattered, his confidence evaporating in an instant. "Your wife? Alistair, I don't know what you're talking about." I held his gaze, unflinching. "Don't insult me by playing dumb. I know everything. The messages, the meetings, the deception. Do I look like someone who lets things slide?" His face turned ashen, his breath coming in uneven gasps. He fumbled for words, searching for an escape. I gave him none. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my tone ice cold. "You're going to stay away from Sabrina. No calls, no texts, not even a passing glance. If I so much as suspect you've tried to reach her, I will destroy you. Do you understand?" His eyes widened with sheer terror. "Alistair, please. I never meant. Spare me." My words were a sharp cut. "You made your choices. Now you deal with the consequences. If you ever contact her again, I'll make sure you lose everything. Your career, your reputation, your entire future. Do not test me, Grant. Do you understand?" He swallowed hard, nodding frantically. "Yes, I understand. I won't see her again, I swear." I held his gaze a moment longer, ensuring the weight of my words settled in, then stood, my message delivered. "Good. And remember, cross me again, and you'll regret it." As I walked out of his office, a dark satisfaction settled in my chest. I had reclaimed control. I had made him afraid. And yet, somehow, it still wasn't enough. Not yet. There was still one last move to play. That evening, when I stepped through the door, Sabrina was waiting in the living room. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes swollen and red, evidence of hours spent crying. She looked at me with desperation, searching for a trace of mercy. But I felt nothing. My decision was final. "Alistair, please. I regret everything. Just tell me what to do. I'll make it right." Her voice wavered, thick with sorrow, but I remained unmoved. "Don't leave me," she pleaded, her hands shaking. I didn't even flinch. "You made your bed, Sabrina. The moment you betrayed me, you sealed your fate. There's no coming back from this." She dissolved into frantic sobs, but my heart had long since turned to stone. "I don't want you anymore. Not after what you did. My trust is shattered, and with it, any love I had left." Her wails filled the room, but I stood firm. "I hope Grant was worth it, because you'll never have me again." I turned my back on her without another word. As she collapsed, Drowning in her own anguish, I walked away. But this wasn't over. Not yet. The following morning, I sat across from my attorney. The divorce had already been set in motion, but I would make sure Sabrina didn't walk away unscathed. Every asset, every shared possession, every dollar accumulated over 33 years, I had it all documented. No loopholes, no escape. And Grant? He would be severed from her life completely. A legal clause would ensure that any attempt to reach him would result in severe consequences. There would be no clemency, no second chances. Then, I delivered the final blow. I had discovered Sabrina's hidden bank account, the one she had been quietly siphoning money into behind my back. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. I simply erased it. Every last cent disappeared, forever beyond her grasp. It was cold. It was calculated. But it was justice. And Grant? His downfall was swift. A few well-placed words to the right people ensured he became a pariah. Blacklisted from industry events, barred from professional circles. His reputation was decimated. His career reduced to ashes. There was no way back for him, no way to salvage what I had destroyed. They had made their choices. I had simply ensured they suffered the consequences. This story has come to an end. The moral of this story is simple, yet harsh. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it's broken, there's no going back. Betrayal isn't just an act of infidelity. It's the destruction of everything built over the years. Sometimes, betrayal opens your eyes, revealing who truly stands beside you. Love is important, but so is awareness. Never ignore the warning signs. Don't let blind faith cloud your judgment. Most importantly, remember, respect and honesty are worth more than any vows, and the truth always comes to light, no matter how painful it may be. What's your opinion? Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from, and I'll say goodbye to you until the next video. Goodbye. Life in Jacob Miller's quiet suburban neighborhood had always been predictable, until he saw something he wished he hadn't. The lingering glances, the subtle touches, the hushed conversations that ended the moment someone walked by. This wasn't just harmless interaction, it was the beginning of betrayal. He'd seen it before because, once upon a time, he had been the one making those mistakes. But now, he faced a choice. Look the other way, or step in, knowing the consequences could be irreversible. One word could save a marriage, or destroy it forever. But what if this wasn't just about one person's mistake? What if something much darker was at play? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. I'm not someone who actively seeks out confrontation. There are moments, however, when avoiding it simply isn't an option. A single conversation can change the course of a relationship forever, and while not every dispute is worth engaging in, knowing which ones are is crucial. If a close friend, sibling, or partner is unlikely to budge on a relatively minor issue, is it worth the potential fallout just to prove a point? Yet, steering clear of confrontation altogether can sometimes lead to even bigger problems, like the situation I now find myself in. As I zipped up my suitcase, my mind replayed everything I had witnessed. I've always considered myself observant, and last week's neighborhood pool party gave me reason to pay closer attention. Something about the way Sabrina and Cyrus interacted felt off. She seemed to gravitate toward him, finding excuses to linger nearby, and he certainly wasn't discouraging it. The casual brush of their hands, the quick glances when they thought no one was looking, the way conversations abruptly ended when someone approached, it all painted an unsettling picture. The realization that someone I cared about might be capable of betrayal was difficult to stomach. Still, I was fairly certain nothing had escalated beyond flirtation, yet. There was still time to intervene before things spiraled beyond control. My name is Jacob Miller, and after decades working in the corporate world, I've recently stepped into retirement. I live in a quiet, scenic neighborhood, a place close enough to the city for convenience, but far enough to escape the chaos. It's a peaceful community, the kind where neighbors greet one another warmly, and parents feel safe letting their kids play outside unsupervised. Sabrina and Michael live 2 doors down, and I've always had a soft spot for them. They remind me of my own children, which has led me to offer guidance over the years, both professionally and personally. While I've shared meals with both of them, it's Michael I've grown particularly close to. He's helped me out with small home projects, and in return, I've given him advice, whether it was about negotiating a better deal on their new car or handling workplace politics. We also share a love for the same football team, and since Sabrina prefers a quieter home, Michael often came over to watch games with me, free to cheer without restraint. Michael works long hours at an accounting firm, heading out early each morning, while Sabrina manages the family restaurant at night. This schedule allows her a few extra hours at home each morning. Knowing she hadn't left for work yet, I decided now was my best chance to have a private conversation. Grabbing a bag of tools I needed to return to Michael, I walked over and rang their doorbell. Within moments, Sabrina appeared, dressed in a striking outfit, one that revealed a little more than necessary for a casual morning at home. "Hey, Jacob. Need something? Michael already left for work if you're looking for him." "Hey, Sabrina. No, I just came by to return some tools he lent me." I lifted the bag slightly. "Where should I leave them?" "Oh, Michael's particular about where things go. I'm not sure where he'd want them." She hesitated before gesturing toward the garage. "Just set them on the table in there. He'll sort them later." She led me to the garage door and pushed it open, pointing toward a table. I carefully placed the tools down, habitually organizing them as I always did. Sabrina offered me a polite smile. "Thanks for bringing them back. I'll let Michael know you stopped by." She hesitated, then added, "Would you like a cup of coffee? I just made some." "That sounds great, Sabrina. Actually, there's something I wanted to talk to you about." Her expression shifted slightly, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Oh? What's on your mind?" She motioned for me to follow her inside and handed me a cup of freshly brewed coffee. Taking a seat, I wrapped my hands around the warm mug before asking, "Have I ever told you why my wife isn't around anymore?" Her forehead creased. "No, you haven't. I figured you were either divorced or widowed, but I didn't want to pry." "I heard you and Michael are thinking about starting a family in a few years," I asked, taking a sip. She nodded slowly. "That's the plan. We want to be financially secure first, get a few key promotions, build our savings, so we can provide for our kids without sacrificing our careers." I offered a faint smile. Patricia, my ex-wife, and I had similar plans. I was deeply immersed in consulting, and she was a teacher. We earned a comfortable living, primarily from my job, but we treated our finances as a joint effort. She wanted to keep working until we had kids, and once they came along, we agreed she'd stay home. Sabrina listened intently, absently tracing the rim of her coffee cup. I could see the curiosity in her gaze, though she hadn't yet grasped where I was going with this. We ended up having 3 children over the course of a decade. By the time our youngest started school, my career had advanced to a point where it didn't make sense for Patricia to return to work. Financially, we were secure. That's when the real problem started. Sabrina leaned forward slightly, her interest piqued, but her uncertainty evident. I pressed on, aware that she was beginning to realize this wasn't just a casual story. It was a warning. I spent long hours at the office, and by the time I got home, I had nothing left to give. 12-hour workdays left me drained, and helping with homework or wrangling the kids into bed felt like an impossible task. At least, that was my perspective. I let the words settle between us, giving her a moment to absorb them. Slowly, she began to understand. This wasn't just a glimpse into my past. It was a cautionary tale, meant for her to hear before it was too late. Every evening when I stepped through the door, Patricia had already spent hours juggling 3 energetic children on her own. She was exhausted, desperate for relief, and in her eyes, I was failing as a father. From my perspective, though, my role was clear. I was the provider, and everything at home fell under her responsibility. This fundamental divide eroded the foundation of our marriage. There were nights we barely tolerated each other. "Couldn't you find a different job? One that gave you more time at home, even if it meant making less?" she'd ask. If Patricia had re-entered the workforce, our combined earnings would have likely stayed the same, and we could have shared parenting more equitably. That would have been the right solution. Now, looking back, I see it so clearly. That was the path we should have taken. Maybe if we had, we'd still be together today. But we didn't. Hindsight makes everything obvious. At the time, I was fixated on advancing my career, chasing the ever-elusive promotion. I had the talent to make it, but so did plenty of others. To stand out, I had to match their dedication, if not surpass it. That meant long hours, relentless effort, and sacrificing anything that stood in the way. So I kept choosing work over my family. As my responsibilities grew, I was frequently away, sometimes for weeks on end. I sighed, staring out the window at the empty streets bathed in sunlight, a city caught up in another bustling workday. That was the price I paid. That was why my marriage unraveled. At the time, the pressure was suffocating. Enormous projects demanded 80-hour weeks, leaving me drained. And when I finally made it home, I wasn't met with peace. I was met with chaos. 3 young children vying for my attention, a wife hanging by a thread, and a household that felt more like an obligation than a refuge. None of it justifies what I did, but I had opportunities to stray, and I took them. Back then, I didn't even consider it infidelity. It only happened when I traveled. The intimacy in my marriage had faded long before, and I wasn't willing to face that reality. But despite everything, I loved Patricia. Even after all these years, I still do. That love, however, didn't stop me from betraying her, from causing pain I never intended to inflict. How did she find out? Sabrina's voice was sharp with curiosity. "I wasn't as discreet as I thought," I admitted. "She must have had her suspicions, hired someone to find out, and she got all the proof she needed. She had access to our shared finances, so within days I was served with divorce papers. Less than a year later, I was officially alone. I fought to stop it. I pleaded with her to stay. I suggested counseling. I even offered to let her quit her job, hoping that might change things. But by then, we had let things fester too long. My betrayal had been the final, irreparable blow. At first, I dreaded coming home to my kids. Then, I dreaded coming home to an empty house. Now, I can talk about it with a sense of detachment, but I know Sabrina saw the lingering sorrow in my face. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "Don't be," I replied. "I brought this on myself." Even though I understood deep down that the failure of our marriage wasn't entirely my doing, I couldn't hold Patricia responsible. We had both contributed to the cracks in our relationship, but in the end, I was the one who shattered it. We had choices, and we made the wrong ones. But she never hurt me the way I hurt her. Even after all this time, I still love her, not for who she is now, but for who she once was to me. We rarely cross paths. "You never found someone else?" Sabrina asked. "Not really," I admitted. The court granted Patricia full custody, leaving me with visitation rights. I threw myself into work, using it as an escape. I saw my children a couple of weekends each month, but that was all. I dated here and there, but none of those relationships lasted. Once they realized my real commitment was to my job, they walked away. "What about Patricia? Did she remarry?" "Not right away," I said. Being a single mother of 3 didn't make dating easy. She was overwhelmed, too busy keeping everything together. But once the kids got older, she met someone, a fellow teacher. Eventually, they got married. I let out a dry chuckle. Funny, isn't it? She was the love of my life, but soon, she'll have been married to him longer than she ever was to me. It's a strange feeling to realize that the person who meant everything to you now only sees you as a painful chapter they had to leave behind. Sabrina hesitated, as if searching for the right words. I don't know what to say, but... Jacob, why are you telling me all this? Because this is how it happened, I said. She must have suspected I knew more than I let on. Maybe she was trying to gauge just how much. My regrets didn't end with the divorce. For a long time, I believed I still had a chance to win Patricia back. I tried to use whatever leverage I had, including our kids. I told them I had made mistakes, that I was sorry, that I wanted to fix things. But I twisted the truth, making it seem like she was the one who gave up on our marriage, rather than admitting I had been the one to destroy it. The younger two saw through my lies from the beginning. It took years to repair my relationship with them. Even now, I can sense the distance they maintain. I show up for their family events, but they never come to see me. Sabrina caught on to something. You mentioned the younger two. What about the eldest? You and Cyrus seem close. Cyrus? Cyrus is both my deepest regret and my most undeniable failure. When my marriage unraveled, he was old enough to remember the good years, before tension seeped in. As a teenager, he bore witness to the dissolution of our family, and though I, his father, longed to repair the damage, his mother was unwilling. I never demanded that he choose sides, yet I also never reassured him that his mother wasn't to blame. His resentment festered, making Patricia's life unbearable until the day he left for college. Of my 3 children, he remained closest to me, but that bond was forged in something broken. I failed him as a father, and the weight of that failure is something I carry still. Meeting her eyes, I admitted, I'm responsible for the way he sees right and wrong. Sabrina's brows knit together in confusion. What are you talking about? He seems perfectly normal. Did he do something? I let out a slow breath. I know what's going on, Sabrina. I see it. The way they looked at each other had not escaped me. From the moment they met at my barbecue, Cyrus had manufactured reasons to be around. Suddenly, he had an interest in my neighborhood's pool parties. He visited on weekends, yet barely spent time with me. Even tonight he invited me to dinner, but when I suggested an alternative, he conveniently had other commitments. I wasn't foolish. I knew exactly what those plans entailed. My instincts told me Cyrus had a pattern, a fixation on women who were already spoken for. Sabrina wasn't the first. But where had this compulsion come from? Was it my own failings that led him to believe infidelity was acceptable? Or was he trying to rewrite the past, punishing his mother by wrecking other marriages? The reasoning was irrelevant. The fact remained, I loved my son, but I did not like the man he had become. Sabrina averted her gaze, and I seized the moment to press forward. Why are you even entertaining this? You love Michael. That much is obvious. Conflict flashed across her face. You don't understand. Maybe you're scared of what's next, I suggested. Maybe this is your way of chasing something you feel slipping away. I don't know, Sabrina. But I do know this. It won't end well. If I've noticed, others have too, and sooner or later someone will say something to Michael. Then he'll know. I let the thought settle. Picture the look on his face when the truth comes out. Can you live with that? Her voice was scarcely more than a whisper. It's not what you think. Cyrus is just a distraction. Michael is the one I love. I shook my head. You don't have to lie to me. My voice was gentle but firm. I've stood where you stand. Every ounce of attention you give Cyrus is something you steal from Michael. You may not have crossed the line yet, but marriage isn't something you can put on pause and expect to return to when it's convenient. She scoffed, muttering, That's easy for you to say. Good. Her irritation meant she knew I was right. She could resent me all she wanted, but that only confirmed my suspicions. If anyone had the right to warn her, it was me. I had walked this path, and I understood exactly where it led. Just think before you make a choice you can't undo, I urged. And if you're truly done with Michael, have the decency to tell him. He deserves that much. But don't string him along while you figure yourself out. Be better than that. Her expression hardened. Why does it matter to you? Why are you inserting yourself into my life? Is this some desperate attempt at redemption? I exhaled, shaking my head. I wish it were that simple. I really do. But no, Sabrina, there's no making up for my past. I was reckless, selfish, too caught up in myself to see the harm I was causing. I can't change what I did, but I can stop someone else from making the same mistakes. Whether for your sake, for Michael's, or both of you together or apart, I won't just stand by and watch this unfold. Draining the last sip of my coffee, I pushed back from the table. Thanks for the drink. As I walked away, I left her to wrestle with her choices. I hoped she would do the right thing. If she didn't, well, I liked Michael. I wouldn't let him be the last to know. It might come down to her word against mine, and as her husband, he'd probably take her side. But I was prepared. Closing the door behind me, I reached into my pocket and switched off the recorder. I prayed it wouldn't come to that. But this conversation wasn't the only one that needed to happen. For too long, I had let Cyrus run unchecked. That night, I would sit him down, confront him, and offer him one last opportunity to change. The decision would be his. In the end, Sabrina and Michael found their way back to each other, and I had the honor of becoming the godfather to their first child. As for Cyrus, he refused to change, and when someone finally ran out of patience, they ensured he would never again have the chance to destroy another life. This story has come to an end. Life is a series of choices, and every choice has consequences. Sometimes, a mistake seems small, but it can trigger a chain reaction that destroys trust, families, and futures. Infidelity doesn't begin with an action. It starts in the mind. Relationships aren't something you put on hold. They require daily commitment, honesty, and effort. We shape our future with the decisions we make today, and it's crucial to remember, every action comes back to us. If you truly value someone, appreciate them, communicate, and fix your mistakes before it's too late. Because one day, you might wake up and realize there's no way to turn back. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. Betrayal doesn't start with cheating. It starts with a simple question. When the woman you love, the one you built your life around, suddenly asks, "You don't mind if I go to dinner with another man, do you?" Something inside you snaps. It's not just a question. It's a test, a provocation, or maybe a warning that everything you believed in is crumbling. What do you do when the person you worshipped so easily crosses the line? Stay silent? Swallow the pain? Or show her that the game of harmless outings comes at a price? This isn't just a story about love. It's about boundaries, betrayal, and what happens when a man decides he won't be someone's afterthought anymore. Buckle up. This is going to be brutal. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. Tonight, my wife, Caroline, radiated a liveliness that felt even more electric than usual. After we had finished dinner and settled onto the couch, she suddenly leaped onto my lap, her arms wrapping tightly around me as she showered me with kisses. Her playful nature had always been one of the things I adored most about her, but tonight there was an extra spark, an infectious energy that made my heart swell. She laughed freely, her joy filling the room as she held me close. In moments like these, I was reminded of the exact reasons I had fallen in love with her. 5 years ago, when our paths first crossed, my life had been in the midst of a major shift. Transitioning out of the Marines had been a challenge. and adjusting to civilian life felt like navigating unknown terrain. To regain a sense of purpose, I threw myself into physical training, channeling my discipline into weightlifting and self-defense. As a former drill instructor, I had taken pride in molding raw recruits into disciplined soldiers, but I had always sensed there was another path meant for me. My passion for fitness eventually led me to invest my savings into opening my own gym, a place where I could guide others on their own fitness journeys. The business took off quickly, demanding my full attention as I dedicated myself to its success. Standing at 6'4" and weighing in at a solid 255 pounds of muscle, I was confident in my ability to transform not just bodies, but also mindsets. In just 6 months, I witnessed remarkable changes in my clients, not just in their physiques, but in their confidence and strength. Their progress reaffirmed that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Then, one day, Caroline entered my life. She was the younger sister of one of my clients, and despite being much smaller and lighter than me, there was an instant connection between us. At just 22, Caroline possessed a youthful innocence that was endearing. While fitness hadn't initially been her passion, we found countless other ways to spend time together, our days filling with shared laughter and meaningful conversations. Before long, we were inseparable, and a year later, we were married. I never once questioned my decision. Caroline was everything I could have asked for in a partner, loving, affectionate, and fiercely devoted. Her boundless energy, though sometimes misunderstood by others, was something I deeply cherished. However, there were moments when her impulsiveness left me bewildered. She lacked the practical caution I sometimes wished she had. As a gym owner, I often found myself the focus of unwanted attention from female clients. To set clear boundaries and protect both my reputation and my marriage, I installed surveillance cameras throughout the facility, not out of distrust, but as a necessary safeguard in an industry where lines could easily be blurred. Caroline was fully aware of this and even found reassurance in monitoring the footage from home, knowing that everything remained professional. Financially, we were secure, my gym thrived, and Caroline supplemented our income with her career as a real estate agent. Together, we had built a life that many would envy. Then, one quiet Sunday afternoon, something changed. We were curled up in the living room, enjoying a bottle of wine, savoring the warmth of each other's presence. As always, Caroline was playful, giggling as she climbed into my lap, her eyes shining with mischief. But tonight, there was something different, something unreadable in her expression. With a teasing lilt in her voice, she said, "Sweetheart, Kellen is taking me out to dinner next Friday. You're okay with that, right?" At first, I laughed, assuming she was joking. But when she repeated the question, her tone dripping with innocent sweetness, the humor drained from the moment. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked again, her eyes meeting mine. A strange tension settled over me. "Caroline, what exactly are you saying?" She chuckled, as if my concern was unwarranted. "Kellen from work invited me to dinner, and I told him yes. It's nothing serious." My stomach tightened. My mind struggled to process what she was so casually admitting. My wife, the woman who had vowed her devotion to me, was telling me, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, that she had accepted a dinner invitation from another man. Words failed me. "Hold on," I finally managed, my voice strained. "Are you seriously asking me if you can go on a date with Kellen?" She tilted her head, flashing a reassuring smile. "It's not really a date, just dinner, and maybe a movie." A suffocating pressure closed in around me. My thoughts raced, scrambling for an explanation that made sense. Caroline, the woman I trusted beyond measure, was trying to convince me that spending an intimate evening alone with another man wasn't a betrayal. Frustration bubbled inside me as I fought to keep my composure. "Caroline, that's exactly what a date is," I said, my voice firm. "You're telling me you're going out alone with another guy and you don't see a problem with that?" She blinked, as if surprised by my reaction. "He's just a coworker. We get along well, and he makes me laugh. It's not like it's romantic, just dinner and a movie," she repeated, her tone light, as though this was a trivial matter. I stared at her, disbelief coursing through me. "Caroline, I've never once considered being with anyone else. How can you even entertain this?" Her gaze held a mix of amusement and exasperation. "Dominic, please don't be jealous." To her, he was nothing, just an insignificant moment, a fleeting evening that held no meaning. That's what she assured me anyway. Nothing between us had changed, she insisted. It was just dinner, not a date. She hoped I wouldn't be upset. Her words hit like lead, dense and unforgiving. It wasn't jealousy that consumed me, but something far deeper, a gnawing sense of betrayal. The idea that she willingly chose to spend time with another man, even under the guise of innocence, unsettled something fundamental within me. I had never once wavered in my devotion, never so much as entertained the thought of stepping outside the sacred bounds of our marriage. Yet here she was, standing before me, asking for my blessing to go out with another man. I searched for words, but they evaded me, lost beneath the tide of disbelief, anger, and sorrow. When I finally spoke, my voice was tight, the weight of my emotions pressing down on every syllable. "I don't know if I can handle this right now, Caroline." Silence stretched between us, thick and strained. My instincts, sharpened by years of control, urged me to remain composed, to respond with calculation rather than raw emotion. And then, as if clarity had struck all at once, an idea took shape in my mind. Without another word, I reached for my phone and dialed. "Isabella?" I greeted when she answered. "Is your invitation for Friday still open?" Isabella, a client whose interest in me had been evident for some time, barely hesitated before confirming. She was more than eager. With deliberate calm, I turned to Caroline and informed her of my own plans for Friday, plans that now aligned perfectly with hers. The moment the words left my lips, her expression shifted, indignation flickering across her features as she shot up from where she sat, her voice laced with accusation. "You're seriously going through with this?" she demanded, her anger cutting. "With some woman who—" I didn't let her finish. "So, it's acceptable for you to have dinner with a colleague, but when I do the same, it's a problem?" Her frustration was palpable. "That's different," she snapped. I met her glare evenly. "How, exactly? Because you've convinced yourself it's harmless?" The hypocrisy of it all was staggering. I refused to let it go unchallenged. I watched as the certainty in her eyes wavered, as the confidence she wore like armor cracked. I pressed forward. "Until now, I've never wanted anyone else, but you're the one who brought up the idea of stepping outside our marriage like it was nothing. Did you really think I'd just sit back and accept it?" The room felt smaller, suffocating under the weight of unspoken truths. I could see the conflict in her, emotions warring beneath the surface. I still loved her, but something between us had fractured, something delicate, something vital. The days that followed were steeped in tension, in unspoken resentment and lingering uncertainty. Caroline tried to make amends, her apologies spilling out in tearful admissions, but each explanation only underscored how little she understood the gravity of her actions. Her words felt empty, her remorse inadequate. No matter what she said, I couldn't silence the image of her with him, couldn't erase the sting of her disregard. For the first time since we vowed our lives to each other, I chose distance. I moved into the guest room, unwilling to share a bed with a woman who had so easily dismissed my feelings. I needed space, clarity. Staying in our bedroom would only weaken my resolve, and I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. She had to understand the weight of what she had done. A thought simmered in the back of my mind, not revenge, not in the form of infidelity, but something deeper, a consequence, a reckoning. Then Friday arrived. The air was thick with unspoken words as the evening loomed over us. Despite her apologies, despite her insistence that she had reconsidered, she still planned to go. And I let her. Every instinct screamed at me to stop her, to demand she stay, but I refused to beg. Instead, I focused on my own preparations. I dressed with purpose, selecting my finest attire with meticulous care. I could feel her watching, the weight of her gaze pressing against my back. She didn't question me, though. Maybe, deep down, she already knew. "You're actually leaving?" I asked, though we both knew her answer. She nodded, avoiding my eyes. "All right then," I said, my voice even. "Enjoy your night." I turned to leave but paused just before the door. I needed her to feel the impact of this moment, to understand the depth of what she had set in motion. "Just so you know," I added, my tone cool, deliberate, "I won't be waiting for you tonight. You don't get to do this and expect everything to stay the same. I'm done." I didn't linger to see her reaction. The weight of reality settled between us, but this was necessary. If she wanted to test the limits of our marriage, she needed to understand that I wouldn't be the one left waiting. As I drove toward Isabella, I felt something unexpected, a sense of finality. This wasn't about the date itself. It was about something much larger. It was about self-respect, about drawing a line in the sand. I refused to be taken for granted. It was never really about Isabella. She was just the vehicle for the message I needed to send. Tonight was a statement, one I knew Caroline would fully understand, a direct response to the choices she had made. She had set this chain of events in motion, and now she had to face the consequences. She had crossed a line, and I was determined to make sure she felt the impact of her actions. To my surprise, the evening with Isabella exceeded my expectations. We had dinner at an elegant restaurant, the conversation flowing easily, followed by an exhilarating night of dancing. She carried herself with a kind of assurance Caroline had never possessed, unapologetic, bold, entirely at ease with her own desires. There was an undeniable pull between us, a chemistry I hadn't anticipated, but one that was impossible to ignore. Yet even as I lost myself in the night, Caroline remained a shadow in my mind. The woman I had vowed to spend my life with, the one who had so carelessly betrayed that promise, lingered in the recesses of my thoughts. After leaving the club, Isabella and I took a slow walk along the shoreline, the waves shimmering under the pale glow of the moon, the crisp night air wrapping around us. For just a moment, I let myself imagine a future unburdened by the past, what it would be like to move forward with someone like her. The thought was tempting, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about moving on. This was about making Caroline see exactly what she had done. The night had been enjoyable, even meaningful in its own way, but that was never the point. When I walked Isabella to her door, we shared a lingering kiss, one free from the weight of history, untouched by past wounds. "Good night, Dominic," she murmured, her smile knowing before she disappeared inside. As I stood there, watching the door close, I realized that no matter what had happened tonight, Caroline still occupied my thoughts. I had done what I set out to do, yet the anger still simmered beneath the surface, refusing to fade. I wasn't sure what to expect when I returned home, but one thing was certain. Caroline would have to face the reality of her choices. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt heavy with unspoken words. She was waiting, her face blotchy, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "You're back," she said, her voice unsteady. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked past her, heading straight for the living room. She followed, but I refused to acknowledge her presence. The soft tread of her footsteps behind me was a sharp reminder of why we were here in the first place. "You went out with Isabella," she said finally, her tone tight, laced with the first hints of anger. "I did," I responded evenly. "Just like you went out with Kellen." The silence that followed was suffocating, her face twisted in frustration, her mind scrambling for an explanation. "So that's what this is?" Payback? You think spending a night with someone else evens the score? Dominic, you don't understand. It wasn't a date. It wasn't what you think. I rose to my feet, towering over her. You don't get to rewrite what happened, Caroline. You made your decision. Now you have to live with it, just like I do. Tears welled in her eyes as she pleaded, her voice shaking. Please, Dominic. I made a mistake. I didn't realize how much it would hurt you. I never meant, please, don't shut me out. For the first time that night, something in me wavered, a flicker of sympathy. But it wasn't enough. You want to fix this? You want to prove our marriage still means something? Then show me. Be the woman I believed in. My voice hardened. Because if you keep treating me like an afterthought, if you keep making me feel like I don't matter, then we're done. Caroline collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. I love you, Dominic. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this. Then why did you do it? My voice was cold, sharper than I intended. Why did you think you could choose someone else and expect me to just accept it? You set this in motion, Caroline. Now, you're going to see what it means to play with fire. Without another word, I turned and walked away, heading for the guest room. I couldn't be near her. Not tonight. Not after everything. The wound was too raw, the betrayal too fresh. But this wasn't just about hurting her in return. It was about making her understand the depth of the damage she had inflicted. This wasn't about a single night. It was about everything that had led us to this breaking point. In the days that followed, I kept my distance. Every attempt she made to reach out was met with silence. She apologized, begged, cried, but none of it erased what had already been done. The betrayal replayed in my mind like a wound that refused to heal, a scar I couldn't ignore. And deep down, I knew the truth. There was no way back from this. Then came the moment we both knew was inevitable. She had asked for this conversation, still clinging to the idea that words might be enough to mend what had shattered. But I had already made my choice. I'm done, Caroline. My voice was steady, firm. This marriage is over. Her face crumpled, devastation breaking across her features. No. Dominic, please, don't do this. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of finality settle over me. You had your chance. You made your decision. And now, I'm making mine. Her tears fell freely, but I didn't look away. I had spent too long drowning in my own pain. It was time to walk away for good. We can move past this. I love you. I never meant to lose you. But you did, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. You made your choice, and now I have to make mine. As I turned away, a strange sense of relief washed over me. It was over. The marriage had unraveled to its inevitable conclusion, and though the pain of it still lingered, I knew this was the only way forward. Caroline would have to reckon with the consequences of her actions, just as I would have to face my own. But this wasn't just about her betrayal with Kellen. It wasn't about punishing her or making her feel the weight of what she had done. This was about reclaiming something greater, my life, my sense of self, my dignity. And as I stepped forward, leaving her in the past, I made a quiet promise to myself. No one, not even Caroline, would ever take that from me again. This story has come to an end. Relationships are built not just on love, but on respect, trust, and boundaries. Betrayal doesn't start with physical infidelity. It begins with seemingly innocent choices that chip away at the foundation of a partnership. When one person prioritizes their desires over the value of the relationship, they risk losing everything. True love isn't about testing limits or seeking something new on the side. It's about choosing loyalty, not just in actions, but in thoughts. Because where there is no respect, love will eventually fade. Cherish those who value you. And remember, trust is easy to break, but nearly impossible to restore. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.